I was tying my shoes when the phone buzzed against the kitchen counter, and the name on the screen made my stomach drop before I even read the message. My attorney. Not his paralegal, not his office line. Him. And the text was 4 words long. Call me. Right now. It was a Sunday. Lawyers don't text you on a Sunday at 5 in the afternoon unless something has caught fire. I had my jacket on. My wife's old casserole dish was sitting on the counter, the one I still used, even though she'd been gone 3 years now, packed full of the green bean thing my daughter pretended to like when she was a girl. I was supposed to be at her house in 40 minutes. It was her husband's birthday. There would be a cake, candles, the grandkids running around the living room in their socks. I'd been looking forward to it all week. I sat back down on the bench by the door and called him. He picked up on the first ring, which a man who bills $400 an hour almost never does. Don't go to the dinner tonight, he said. No hello. Or, if you go, don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. And whatever you do, don't let them put a single piece of paper in front of you. I laughed. I actually laughed because the whole thing was so far outside anything I expected that my brain couldn't catch up. What are you talking about? It's a birthday party. There's a Costco sheet cake. Listen to me, he said, and his voice had a flatness to it I'd only heard once before, the day he told me my wife's estate was finally settled. I got a call Friday from a colleague over at the county. He shouldn't have told me what he told me, so you didn't hear this from me. But there's a petition that got filed last week, a petition for conservatorship over you. I didn't say anything. The hallway clock kept ticking. Do you understand what that means? He asked. I did, and I didn't. I knew the word. I'd seen those documentaries about old folks getting locked up in their own lives, some stranger or some relative taking control of every dollar, every doctor's appointment, every decision about where they sleep at night. But I was 71. I drove myself everywhere. I did my own taxes. I built a 38-year career as a structural engineer, and I still got calls from the firm asking me to consult. I was not a man who needed a keeper. Who filed it? I asked. There's some cold animal part of me already knew. He was quiet for a second. Your daughter, he said, and her husband, the two of them jointly. I want to tell you that I felt rage. That would be the honest, dramatic thing to say. But what I actually felt, sitting there on that little bench with my coat on and the casserole going cold, was something more like the floor tilting, like a man on a boat who feels the deck move and can't yet tell if it's a wave or the whole thing going down. My daughter. My only child. The little girl I taught to ride a bike on Maple Street. The young woman whose wedding I paid for in full, every flower and every plate, because her husband's family said they were between liquidity events, whatever that was supposed to mean. The mother of the 2 grandkids I loved more than my own breath. She had gone to a courthouse, hired a lawyer, and signed a document that said her father had lost his mind. Why? I said. It wasn't even a question. There was no air behind it. I don't have all of it, my attorney said, but the petition leans on a few things. It says you've been making, quote, erratic financial decisions. It cites the money you moved into that annuity last spring. It says you've been, quote, increasingly isolated and confused since your wife's passing. And it mentions, he paused, it mentions that you gave away a substantial sum to a person outside the family. That's a direct line from the filing. The annuity. I'd moved a chunk of my retirement into a guaranteed income product after my financial advisor walked me through it for 2 hours. It was the most boring, conservative, responsible thing a widower could possibly do. Erratic. The word sat in my chest like a swallowed stone. And the substantial sum. I knew exactly what that was, and the knowing made me feel sick in a whole new direction. Do you want to know what I think they're doing? He asked. Tell me. I think tonight isn't a birthday party. I think tonight is the part where they get you relaxed, get you comfortable, maybe get a drink in you, and then someone slides a power of attorney across the table and explains how it would just make everything so much simpler if you signed it, so they can help. And once you sign that, the conservatorship petition becomes a formality. They'll have already proven you're cooperative and incapacitated in the same breath. He let that land. I've seen it twice this year. It works because the people doing it are the people you'd never suspect. That's the whole mechanism. You don't put your guard up against your own kid. I looked at the casserole dish. The condensation was beading on the foil. What do you want me to do? I asked him. 2 options, he said. You don't go. You call them and say you're not feeling well, and we file a response Monday morning and fight it the slow, clean way. Or, and here something shifted in his tone, something that almost sounded like he was smiling. You go. You eat the cake. You sing happy birthday, and you find out exactly how far they've gone before they know you know anything at all. I thought about my granddaughter, who was 9 and had started ballet that fall, and made me promise I'd come to her recital in the spring. I thought about my grandson, 6, who fell asleep on my shoulder every single time I sat down on that couch, like clockwork, like a little switch flipped. I'm going, I said. I want to back up and tell you about the money, because that substantial sum to a person outside the family is the thread that the whole rotten sweater unravels from, and you deserve to hear it the way it actually happened, not the way they bent it. 18 months ago, a woman named Marguerite Vance knocked on my door. She was maybe 45, dressed in scrubs, and she was crying so hard she could barely talk. She lived 4 houses down in the little rental on the corner. I'd waved at her 100 times. Her husband had died of a heart attack in the spring, 51 years old, no warning, and he'd been the one who carried the health insurance. She was a home health aide, the kind of person who wipes the chins and changes the sheets of dying strangers for $16 an hour, and she had 2 boys and a stack of medical bills from her husband's 3 days in the ICU that ran past $60,000. She wasn't asking me for money. I need you to understand that. She'd knocked on my door because her car wouldn't start, and she had a shift at 6, and the bus didn't run to the facility she worked at, and she knew I had 2 cars in the driveway since my wife passed. She wanted to know if she could borrow the truck. That was all. A neighbor asking for a ride, basically. I drove her to work myself. And on the way, she told me everything, not because she was working an angle, but because she was a person who'd been holding it all alone for months, and I happened to be the first human being who asked her how she was actually doing. Over the next few weeks, I did some things. I paid off the medical debt. Yes, all of it. $61,400. I'd had a good career. My house was paid off. My wife and I had saved like the depression babies our parents were, and after she died, I had more than I could spend in 2 lifetimes and no one to spend it with. I set up a small fund for her boys' community college, the kind that pays the tuition directly to the school, so there's no question of where it goes. None of it touched my retirement income. None of it changed the inheritance that was always going to my daughter and her kids. I never hid it. I told my daughter about it at Thanksgiving, proud of it, honestly, the way you'd tell your kid about any good thing you did. I watched her face do something I didn't have a word for at the time. I have a word for it now. It was the look of a woman recalculating a number. Her husband, let me tell you about him for a second. He runs a wealth advisory outfit that I've come to understand is mostly him and the leased BMW. They live in a house that costs more per month than I made in my best year, and every conversation we'd had in the last 2 years had a way of circling back to estate planning and tax efficiency and how a lot of folks your age were putting their assets in trusts the family could manage. I'd nodded along. I'd thought he was just being a salesman, the way some men can't turn it off even at a dinner table. I hadn't understood he was casing the place. So now you know what I knew when I picked up that casserole dish, got in my car, and drove to my daughter's house with my attorney's voice still in my ear. The house was lit up gold against the dark. There were balloons tied to the mailbox. I sat in the driveway for a minute and made my face into a normal face. Then I went in. Dad! My daughter hugged me in the doorway, and I felt her arms around me, and I swear to you, my eyes stung, because the body remembers love even when the mind has gone cold. She smelled like the perfume I bought her every Christmas. We were starting to worry. You're late. Traffic on the parkway, I said. Happy birthday to the man of the hour. Where is he? He came around the corner with a glass of bourbon already in his hand, and another one I noticed poured and waiting on the side table. He handed it to me with a grin. There he is, the patriarch. Sit, sit, you've had a long drive. I took the glass. I did not drink from it. I'd learned something in 38 years of engineering, which is that you never sign off on a structure you haven't inspected, no matter how nice the contractor smiles. Dinner was pot roast. The grandkids were exactly as wonderful as I knew they'd be. My grandson climbed into my lap between the salad and the main course and showed me a drawing he'd made of Grandpa's truck, and I held that piece of paper like it was a deed to something. My granddaughter demonstrated 3 ballet positions next to the table until her mother told her to sit down. For about an hour, it was just a family having dinner, and the awful thing, the thing I'll carry, is how badly I wanted it to be real. Then the kids got sent upstairs to watch a movie, and my son-in-law cleared his throat and said, "So, while we've got you here, we wanted to talk to you about something. Family business." There was a leather folder on the sideboard. I'd clocked it when I walked in. He went and got it. "We've been doing some thinking," my daughter said, and she had her hands folded on the table like a girl reciting a poem she'd practiced. "About the future. About making sure you're taken care of. You've been on your own since Mum, and we worry about you out there in that big house, making big decisions all by yourself." "That's kind of you," I said. Her husband opened the folder, slid out a document, turned it to face me. "It's nothing scary," he said. "It's a durable power of attorney. Real standard stuff for someone your age. It just means that if anything ever happened, God forbid, we'd be able to step in and handle things without a bunch of court headaches. Pay your bills, manage the accounts, keep everything running smooth. You wouldn't even notice a difference day to day." He uncapped a pen and set it on the paper. That little click loud in the quiet room. "We just need a signature here, and we initial here and here." And there it was. Exactly the way my attorney had drawn it in the air. Down to the click of the pen. I looked at my daughter. I looked at her a long time, long enough that it got uncomfortable, long enough that her practiced smile started to come apart at the corners. "Sweetheart," I said, "did you file something with the county last week?" The room went so still I could hear the refrigerator humming in the next room. She didn't say anything, but her eyes flicked to her husband, just for a half second, and that flick told me everything. It told me she'd hoped I'd never find out. It told me she'd known the word for what she was doing the whole time and had chosen the cake and the balloons anyway. "A petition for conservatorship," I went on, and my voice was steadier than I had any right to expect. "Filed jointly, saying I'm confused, erratic, isolated, saying I gave money to a stranger because I've lost the capacity to manage my own affairs." I picked up the pen, looked at it, set it back down on the table next to the unsigned page. Did I get that about right? My son-in-law recovered first, because men like him always do. "Now hold on. I don't know where you're getting told you, look, that's a protective measure. It's not what you're making it sound like. The woman you called a stranger," I said, and now finally the anger came, but it came cold, came clean, came like water finding the bottom of a well. "Her name is Marguerite. Her husband died. I paid off the bills the insurance company refused to cover because the man dropped dead before the open enrollment window closed. I sent her boys to community college. I did it with money that was mine, that was never coming to either one of you in your lifetimes anyway. And I did it because your mother raised me to believe that's what you do when you have more than you need and you're standing next to someone who's drowning. I turned to my daughter, the hard part, the only part that ever really mattered. And you took that, I said. You took the best thing I've done since I buried your mother, and you walked into a courthouse and used it as evidence that I'm out of my mind. She started to cry. I'd like to tell you it didn't move me. It moved me. She was my little girl, but I had learned something on that drive over, turning it all in my head, and it was this. The tears of someone who got caught are not the same as the tears of someone who is sorry, and a man who can't tell the difference is exactly the kind of man you can put a conservatorship on. We're drowning, Dad, she said finally. And at least it was the truth, finally, ugly and bare on the table between us. Do you have any idea what the mortgage is? The kid's school? His business hasn't. We're 3 months behind on, and you're just giving it away to some woman down the street. $60,000 like it's nothing. And someday that's our money. That's the kid's money. And you're... She caught herself. Too late. Someday, I repeated. There it is. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. My hands, I noticed, were not shaking at all. Here's what's going to happen, I said, and I used the voice I used to use on job sites when a contractor tried to cut a corner that would have put people under a collapsed floor someday. Monday morning, my attorney files a response to your petition. He's already got a doctor lined up, my doctor, the one I've seen for 15 years to evaluate me, and I'd put money on the result. Your petition is going to fall apart, and when it does, a judge is going to have some questions about why 2 financially distressed adults filed a fraudulent conservatorship action against a competent man who happens to have assets they wanted. My son-in-law had gone the color of the tablecloth, and here's the part I want you to really hear, I said, softer now, because this was the part I'd decided in the car, and I wanted it to land where it would do the most good. Your mother and I, we left everything to you, the house, the accounts, the annuity that you called. Erratic, the annuity named you as the beneficiary, you fool. That money was always coming home to you. You just couldn't wait the natural number of years for it. The whole estate, all of it, yours. I picked up my casserole dish off the counter. The green beans I'd made because she liked them when she was 9. Tomorrow I'm calling that same attorney, and I'm putting all of it into an irrevocable trust. And the trustee will not be either one of you. It'll be managed for the benefit of my grandchildren, for their education and their care, and it will be there for them, no matter what happens to your mortgage or your business or your marriage. You will not be able to touch it, borrow against it, or file a single piece of paper that changes it. I looked at my daughter. You wanted to manage my money. Congratulations, you've made very sure that you never will. I walked to the foot of the stairs, and I called up, gentle, good night, you two. Grandpa loves you. I'll see you both real soon. And I heard my grandson yell, bye, Grandpa, with that total uncomplicated love that kids have, and that was the only thing in the whole house worth saving, and I had just made sure I'd saved it. Then I walked out past the balloons on the mailbox, and I drove home. And I'll be honest with you, I cried the whole way. Because I'd won, and winning felt exactly like losing a daughter, and nobody warns you that those can be the same night. That was 4 months ago. The petition was dismissed in March. The judge did, in fact, have questions, and the lawyer my son-in-law hired stopped returning my daughter's calls once the trust was finalized and there was nothing left to fight over. The trust is done. Marguerite's older boy made the dean's list. My granddaughter's recital is in 2 weeks, and I have a front row seat, because here is the thing they never understood about me, the thing that was never confused or erratic for one single day of my life. I always knew exactly where my money was going. They just didn't like the answer. So if you're my age, and you're alone in a house that's too quiet, and your kids start using words like simpler and easier and let us help, and especially if they hand you a pen, I want you to do one thing for me. Call your own lawyer first, not theirs, yours, before the cake, before the candles. Because the people who love you don't need you to sign anything. And the ones who hand you a pen at a birthday party were never really celebrating you to begin with. The hardest thing I ever had to learn, I learned at 71, sitting in a driveway with a casserole dish full of green beans on my passenger seat. It's this: the people who hand you a pen are not always the people who love you, and sometimes the two of them wear the same face. I've turned that night over 1,000 times since, and every time I come back to the same chain of small things that built the big thing. My daughter didn't wake up one morning and decide to call her father crazy. It started years before that, with a husband who couldn't turn off the salesman, with a house bought on the idea that more was always coming, with a slow habit of looking at my life and seeing a balance sheet instead of a man. Choices stack. They always stack. By the time she signed that petition, she'd already signed 100 smaller things in her own head, and each one made the next one easier. That's how good people walk themselves into a courthouse to do an ugly thing. Not in one leap. In small, quiet steps, they tell themselves don't count. What saved me wasn't luck. I want to be honest about that, because I think it matters. It was 3 things I'd spent a lifetime building, without knowing I'd need them all in one night. The first was simply doing right, when no one was watching. I paid Marguerite's bills because it was the decent thing, not because it would ever pay me back. And in the end, that quiet decency was the very thing that exposed what my daughter had become. Doing good doesn't always protect you, but it tells you clearly who's standing next to you when the lights come on. The second was keeping my head when my heart was breaking. I didn't drink the bourbon. I didn't sign the paper. I asked one calm question at that table instead of shouting, and that one question did more than an hour of rage ever could. A clear mind in a hard moment is worth more than all the money they were after. And the third was the steadiness to follow through the next morning, when it would have been so much easier to call it a misunderstanding and let it slide. I picked up the phone. I built the trust. I did the cold, lonely, necessary thing because protecting those grandchildren mattered more than being comfortable. I lost a daughter that night. I won't pretend the trust filled that hole, but I protected 2 kids who still run to the door yelling my name, and I learned that love without backbone is just a thing waiting to be taken from you. If you remember nothing else, an old man tells you, remember that. Be good, stay clear-eyed, and when the moment comes, have the spine to act. The world will hand you a pen. Make sure you know what you're signing before you ever pick it up.